What's good, everybody? I'm Keandre, this is Intellect, and welcome back to the channel. Now today we have a very special video, a preseason big board / watch list, because it is about that time. Every year we're seeing prospects come from much different teams, leagues, and backgrounds, and this year feels like the official start to the new norm. So before we get into the board, I wanted to talk a little about where all the draft hopefuls are coming from this year. So starting with college basketball, you got your blue bloods who will be farm factories once again this year. You've got your Dukes, Kentucky, Gonzaga's really a blue blood at this point, all having future pros on their squads, and then sprinkled throughout the rest of the Power 5 conferences and a few on unheralded mid-majors. Overtime Elite is a new alternative professional league for 16 to 18 year olds that could become a staple in this space. Their entire talent pool is split into 3 pretty even teams, and this year they have Banchero to really watch for, but next year there will be a ton of names to pay attention to, like the Thompson twins, among a few others. The basic post-grad or lower prep school schedule, and to a lesser degree a social aspect, worries me a bit about this whole thing, but I'll let it play out first. The G League Ignite program is back again for year 2, and I think this year's team is going to have a much rougher time being competitive than last year's. They'll rely heavily on their young prospects to do everything, and while you've got your Amir Johnson and Pooh Jeters as veterans, it's not the Jarrett Jack, Dante Hall, Bobby Brown, Brandon Ashley group that was there before. And it'll likely be noticeable, though the young guns will have no shortage of minutes, that's for sure. And then of course internationally we've got Australia's NBL with a newfound wealth of prospects. The ACB over in Spain has a few, and there's a couple in the Adriatic Basketball Association, just to name a few. Alright, so now that we got some of that context out the way, let's go ahead and get into the big board, starting with honorable mentions or what just became a really big watch list. The Ignite's Michael Foster should make some noise, although he's a bit of a roller coaster prospect, sort of similar to how Isaiah Todd was coming into last year. Johnny Juzang should make some noise as one of the best players on an exciting UCLA squad. Definitely want to see how he looks this year, especially after an underwhelming performance in the combine scrimmages. Even at their quote-unquote older ages, I think guys like Javon Quinterly, Paul Scruggs, Will Richardson, and Tyson Etienne should generate some buzz. Andre Curbelo should have sort of a breakout year after being more of a complementary piece to Ayo Dosunmu last year at Illinois. And finally, Auburn's Allen Flanagan has real first round potential in my opinion. He had a partial Achilles tear in September resulting in surgery and should be back sometime in late December, early January. If he looks like I expected, he'll quickly go back into that deserved range. Now it's finally time to get into the top 40, starting with MarJon Beauchamp of the G League Ignite. Beauchamp has had one of the more interesting roads to this point, going from being a bench freshman on that Michael Porter Jr., B. Roy, Nathan Hale team, to training with Chameleon BX for the draft, and then to JUCO where he got busy, and now he's with the Ignite, to keep that story really simple. He's an athletic wing with a great ability to get a bucket for himself. He'll have his ups and downs, that's for sure, but it's always hard to bet against a Pacific Northwest talent like him. TCU's Mike Miles might not be on the radar this high across the masses just yet, but I really think he's got the skill set to make it happen. He's a talented 6'2" combo guard who can really get a bucket, and he did his thing with the USA U19 squad this summer. He definitely still needs to improve as a passer among other things, but I watched him give that professional guard gauntlet in the Big 12 the business at times as a freshman last year, and that means something. Also in the Big 12, we've got this Baylor trio of wings or forwards here, starting with Jeremy Sochan. Sochan is probably one of the most under the radar freshmen when it comes to NBA prospects. He's a legit 6'9", about 230 pounds, he's a good athlete, and has a solid all-around game that's really intriguing. From what I've seen so far, I think he has first round potential at some point, but there's still uncertainty about him in this setting. Senior and national champion Matthew Meyer has the stage to be one of the better players in all of college basketball this year. He's an elite shooter at 6'9", and don't let the mullet fool you, he can get to it off the bounce a little too. Maybe he won't put up the gaudiest stat line, but he's someone who I think a lot of NBA teams will like and know exactly what role he can play from the jump. In completing the trio, his teammate Kendall Brown was named Preseason Big 12 Freshman of the Year. He's ridiculously bouncy, especially off 2. He's a great cutter and a versatile defensive prospect, but I'm not quite sure about the rest of his game right now. If he can just show signs of being a more competent shooter from deep and get to the rack more consistently off the dribble, we'll be having a much different conversation about him in a couple months. If there was ever any time for Terrence Shannon Jr. to be a college basketball star, it's now. He made great improvements from his freshman to sophomore year and was a lock for me to get drafted had he declared, but he rolled the dice and the lefty 6'6" swingman will look to show the world how much further he's taken his game and hopefully his stock this year. Health willing Marcus Bagley should at least be in late first round conversations again this year. He's a 6'8" wing who has showed knockdown 3-point potential on spot ups and on the move as well. I think he would have got a lot out of participating in the combine scrimmages last year, but that's neither here nor there. I'm expecting a really nice season from him at Arizona State. Caleb Love might be in for one of those Trey Mann type of sophomore breakouts. He had a really disappointing freshman year, coming in as one of the most talented and regarded guards in the class. I'm still a believer in the talent he showed in high school and the moments he had in the second half of the season. From what I've seen, he looks better physically, and hopefully he can start to put it all together. Colorado's Jabari Walker has a lot of potential in that sort of 3-and-D forward mode. He was super efficient and active in the minutes he played during his freshman season, all coming off the bench, and this year he's a returner to really keep your eyes on, as he presumably has more responsibilities and will show us how real some of those skills are beyond the per 40 stats. St. John's Julian Champagnie was a favorite of mine last year before he decided to spend another year in college. He's a big wing with a really nice scoring skill set and already has experience with what NBA teams want and like from him. Expect a big year from the junior who still doesn't turn 21 until after the draft. It should be an easy 20 a game. Since that early board, Duke's Trevor Keels is a player who I've had more time to really watch, and he's got to be on the NBA radar. He's a 6'4", 220-pound guard built like a brick wall, and he repped out 185 19 times on the bench press, which is a Duke freshman record. He can really shoot it from deep, and I like him defensively. And with AJ Griffin still working his way back from injury, I think we could see Keels kind of get into a groove early and not look back. Nebraska's highest ranked recruit ever, Bryce McGowens, has a great chance to get to the league and join recent Cornhuskers Delano Banton and Isaiah Roby there. He's a long 6'7" off guard who can really score the ball and went toe-to-toe with the likes of Montverde and Sunrise his senior year of high school. He didn't have a great start in his first exhibition game, but I expect him to look more like he did in his second appearance against Colorado. I'd honestly be surprised if JD Davison doesn't have the most eye-popping highlights in this class. He's an unbelievable athlete with the motor to match and the dunking flair to make crowds and social media go crazy. He's actually one of the players I'm most excited to watch because I want to see how he adjusts to this level of competition, the role he plays, and how complete his game is at the moment, especially as a shooter. Now the two talented Gonzaga freshmen. There's a whole lot going on in this backcourt, so I wouldn't be surprised if one or both of these guys return to school for a second year. But I really like the talent of both Hunter Salas and Nolan Hickman. Salas is a lanky two-guard wired to score and plays like a more gifted DeJounte Murray. And then Hickman is more of your floor general who really shines in the pick and roll. It should be interesting to see how they play with both Andrew Nembhard and Julian Strawther, who have already been in the program and probably will start most of the year. I'm still really glad Kadari Richmond transferred to Seton Hall and will get a fresh start this year. You're probably not going to find the statistical evidence that Richmond could be a great prospect in this draft, but the talent is there. He's got great size, a good handle, natural passing talent, and he could be really good defensively. The shot is a big swing factor for him, but even if that isn't completely there yet, I still like him as a prospect. But Luka Garza and Joe Wieskamp gone, Keegan Murray is in line to be the guy for this Iowa team. He might not wow you with his offensive skill set, but he's pretty solid across the board and a nightmare for opponents on defense. I think he's got a game that'll be pretty translatable to an NBA role if he can be more proficient from deep. Mark Williams was one of the better players in his high school class, but it took a minute for him to make an impact at Duke last season. But once he did, he was actually really effective and exciting. Over his last 6 games, Williams averaged about 17 points, 8 rebounds, and over 3 total stocks. He reminds me of a more coordinated Clint Capella type with a potential outside shot, and teams can always use that. Dyson Daniels is currently the second most interesting 2022 prospect in the Ignite program to me. He's a big guard out of Australia who has plenty of experience around the world in various FIBA championships and professional settings. He had an underwhelming statistical debut against Iowa, but I actually thought he had some really nice moments. I definitely want to see how that backcourt shakes out in terms of responsibilities, and if he can be a true lead guard or if he's more of that kind of secondary playmaker that he's kind of shown himself to be up to this point. If we're talking strictly upside, Damian Collins probably has one of the highest. The 6'9" big man out of Atlanta, Texas is raw both physically and on the court, and he might take some time, but a guy at his size who can block shots, hit the three, and handle it just has to get first round buzz, though I couldn't confidently say he'll make an immediate big impact or fully grasp certain things at this level, but I love his potential already. We're halfway through, and it's not to say that several of these players we just mentioned won't make a push for the highest parts of the draft, but as of right now, a lot of these guys inside the top 20 should be familiar names in the upper tier of the class throughout the year. While Yannick Souza has some of the most defensive potential I've seen at that age, there's still so much polish and principles missing from his game, especially on offense. He's a terrific athlete, he's explosive, fluid, all that, but unless something drastic happens, he'll probably be just a young defensive dynamo swing prospect with clear handicapping weaknesses, and I just don't know how high that really gets you. Matthew Cleveland has a chance to be the next and fourth first-round pick in the last 3 years to come out of Leonard Hamilton's Florida State program. He's a strong 6'7" wing who of course is a great athlete and has a ton of upside defensively. Offensively, he's a natural slasher with some potential on the pull-up, but the rest I'm looking forward to seeing. Another Big Ten freshman shooting guard, Michigan State's Max Christie, is already turning heads in the exhibitions. He's a talented shot maker at about 6'6" who already looks more physically developed, and I just like his game. He's like the prototypical 2 guard, and I think he's bound to be a top 20 type of guy. Tennessee's Kennedy Chandler is the only freshman who was named to the Bob Cousy watch list for best point guard in the country, and for good reason. He's super dynamic, a player who has really continued to improve over these last several years, especially as a shooter. He's firmly in the mix for best point guards in this class, even at that size, which is a testament to his game. Ousmane Dieng has one of the most appealing skill sets with his ability to create shots on the perimeter at 6'9". He's still raw and unrefined both physically and just kind of naturally on the court, but from the few games I've been able to watch of his, I've been impressed by his potential. With more exposure in a great professional setting such as the NBL, we'll be able to really gauge where he's at right now. Another one of the top returners in college basketball is Arizona's Ben Mathurin. By the end of last season, he was pretty firmly a late first-round prospect to me, and I was pretty surprised that he didn't declare, but he does have definite lottery potential in this class. He's about 6'6", 6'7", he's a really good athlete, good cutter, good spot-up shooter, and I'm curious to see how he's progressed as a ball handler and as an overall creator. Jean Montero is in one of the most interesting situations I can remember for a prospect with the overtime elite. Lucky for him, he's got a pretty solid track record playing at higher levels already, but he'll be playing against many prep and post-grad schools this year with the best competition he faces likely coming against his overtime program mates. He's a quick guard who can score all over the floor and has made some eye-popping passes. I think he's got definite top 20 lottery type of talent, but where he's going to be hooping and developing is unlike anything we've seen recently. We talked an awful lot about Roko Prkačin last year as it looked like he was going to enter the draft, so you guys should already know quite a bit about him. He's a big forward who's got a wide range of abilities, but the overall consistency and shooting is still on the early agenda. I know this draft isn't exactly full of the high-level lead guard prospects like we've seen in the recent past, but I think TyTy Washington might just have the highest ceiling to reach out of this group. He's smooth and composed, he can shoot it, he's got a great floater game, and I think he's an underrated passer that'll likely show it early and often for Kentucky. He's definitely one of my personal early favorites. Jalen Duren has been one of the most highly touted high school players over the last several years. He's just been sort of a man amongst boys at that 5 spot. Defensively, he looks good in a variety of settings. He's a lob threat, he's got a strong motor on the glass, and has some flashes of potential as a shooter and a passer that keep you intrigued, though it's still unproven. Nikola Jovic is one of the more appealing international prospects. He's a big wing who can handle it, pass it, and shoot it. I'm still curious to see how much he can be dependent on as a creator, or if he's just more of the connector, secondary playmaker type of guy. Regardless, he's in the upper echelon of the class as I see it now. Purdue's Jaden Ivey is the premier returning player to watch for. He's a 6'4" guard who caught fire at the end of the last season and carried that into the FIBA U19 World Cup, where he was one of the most impressive players on that team. He's a tremendous athlete, a disruptive defender who plays with a lot of passion, and the next step is how he develops as a shooter and as a playmaker. Michigan freshman Caleb Houston is a pure shooting wing with an all-around appealing game. His improvement and willingness to take the reins like he did with Canada this summer was encouraging for a player like him. He'll probably revert a little more back to that guy we saw at Montverde, which isn't a bad thing, especially on a really good Michigan team. He makes few mistakes, can defend, and still has the upside that you like in the top 5 to top 10 range. AJ Griffin has definite top 5 potential in this draft, but it's hard for me to ignore his injury history. I'm hoping he can have a mostly healthy freshman season, as he's a big physical wing who has shown he can score in a few different ways, and the defensive potential is obvious. He played in their exhibition against Winston-Salem and was moving pretty well already, so that's a positive sign. Peyton Watson is kind of your classic West Coast top recruit. He's a star who's from Long Beach going to UCLA right as they're back on top of college basketball. He's a top prospect who can score, defend, and even create for others some too. I can see there being some growing pains for him early on in the season, but it'll likely make good on that lottery upside. Jabari Smith is a 6'10" power forward out of Auburn, and if you're a fan of the versatile big man, you're definitely going to be a fan of his. He can shoot it, put it on the floor, he's athletic, and defensively he can be tremendous. It might be a bit of a stretch, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're talking about him being the #1 pick in about 6 months. You can tell if you've gotten this far, there are a ton of big wing shooters and scorers in this class, Patrick Baldwin Jr. being at the top of that list. He's a big time prospect as a 6'9" wing with an absolute burner. He essentially had every offer, but elected to play for his dad at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee in the Horizon League. With all the avenues these top prospects are taking, this is about as interesting to me as any other. It's an immediate lottery prospect playing on the lower mid-major level, so the challenges and advantages to that should be unique. Jaden Hardy comes in at number 3. Hardy's ability to put the ball in the basket and shoot it from deep is special, to the point that you can put him in the conversation for best high school scorers of the last 5 years. I'm definitely interested to see how he rounds out his game and how he weathers the storm of mistakes that are bound to come in this setting with the Ignite. At number 2, we have Gonzaga star Chet Holmgren. Now there's an obvious case to be made for Chet to be number 1, but I'm just a little skeptical about him physically, and from an overall talent perspective, Chet is about as good as it gets. The dude is 7 feet tall, he moves smoother than water, he can shoot it, pass it, block shots with the best of them, and he's tough. He has a little edge to him that some other physically similar prospects never had. I was a big Chet skeptic, but he really sold me over the last year and change, and you've got to expect to see him somewhere in the top of the draft next June. And at number 1, once again, I've got Paolo Banchero. Right now, I think Paolo has the best combination of physical attributes, skill, and potential. He's got a game that's sort of reminiscent of the modern ball handling type of power forward like your Julius Randles and later prime Blake Griffins, but I also think he's got a little bit more wing or perimeter upside than they ever had. It should be fun to see how Duke uses him, because right now, Paolo is the guy for me. Here's a look back at the full preseason top 40. Well, that's going to do it for this preseason big board. I plan on putting out the big board 1.0 a few weeks into the season, so we're probably looking at like late November or maybe early December. So be on the lookout for that. I plan on doing a first look series once again, where we just break down some of the stuff that we've seen early on in the season for some of the top prospects. And yeah, so be sure to follow me on Twitter and Instagram to kind of catch all the short form prospect stuff, the live tweeting of the games, and you'll just be able to see what I'm up to on a nightly basis. So if you're interested, definitely go do that. The links are in the description always. And yeah, I'm just excited to get things back going again. Hopefully see some of these prospects in person, which is always really good to do. I think that's it. I think that's all I needed to say in this outro, but I appreciate you guys for watching. I'm Keandre, this is Intellect, and I'm out.
Yeah. 7 like the Waffle House. 3 cell phone bill, then they talk about. Might pull your girl with a head nod. I used to off white like egg